Comparing the process in which you might perceive and use data and the way a computer system might store it are often very different. However, with the book Database Design Succinctly, you can learn how to model the user's information into data in a computer database system in such a way as to allow the system to produce useful results for the end user. And excitingly enough, in today's video, we have author of Database Design Succinctly and winner of the 2023 Succinctly Readers Awards, Joe Booth. Hi, Joe. How's it going today?
Good. How are you today?
I am doing great. Thank you very much. We're excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here.
Well, I guess to get us started, could you provide us a bit better of a summary than I could of the of your ebook and kind of giving us an insight of what database design is?
Sure. You actually did a very nice summary of it, but basically there's a lot of different ways that businesses and people collect information. And frequently the way it's collected has nothing to do with the way it should be stored in a database. And there are processes that allow us to go from, hey, this collection of information to kind of a semi-formal but very practical process that brings it into the way the database can really work with it. So a lot of the issues that pop up in manual systems can be resolved if you design your databases properly. And that's what the book focuses on, is just what are the processes to go from, hey, somebody's got a stack of papers with information on it, till we now have a database that can use that information.
When did you first become interested in database design?
I started with SQL version 6.5. They're now in 2022, so it's quite a while ago. And I had some training in school on it, but primarily very, very interested in the way the design can be done. Because one of my very first jobs is the people who were working before me, and I was called in to kind of help them out. They made a design where they decided to put all the transaction history per person in a blob, basically a big notebook attached to a file. And when I asked them, well, how are you going to produce a report of transactions by date? I got this blank stare back, like, well, why would you ever want to do that? I said, because it's a common type of request. Well, I guess we'd visit every patient, pull the blob out. And the minute they started looking at that, it's like, no, that's not the solution here. There are much better approaches to it. Yeah, and that just made me realize that a lot of people really don't understand the process. And yeah, it's something I've been very much in my career. I look at database designs and say, what do we do to improve this, and what can we do to make it much more useful, make it perform better, and prevent errors from creeping in. So it's been something I'm very interested in, but I'm old enough to use SQL 6.5. Won't talk about the ones that even used some before that. Before they really got like Microsoft got in the realm, there were a lot of third-party products like FoxPro and DBase that did the same type of thing. So been doing it for a long, long time.
Nice. And I mean, as you mentioned, I know you've been doing it for a while, and it sounds like you kind of helped lead a lot of the structure on this, even asking people like, why aren't we doing this, and not really. Is there anything that would have been really helpful for you to know back then when you were first getting started?
The first and probably the most important thing that I realized very early is when you design, turn off your computer. The tools now are so easy to put something together quickly. The problem is when you do that, you begin to say, oh, wait a minute. You jump in the computer and you don't want to undo what you did because it seems you put some effort in it. So I feel like when you design, and I wish I'd known this first, don't turn the computer on until your paper is all thought out, planned out, then put it in the computer, because it's very easy to throw away a piece of paper. Once you've invested time putting a computer program or design it, it gets a little harder to throw it away. Your mind says, well, if business work, I don't want to lose the work I did. And how many notepads do you have where you just throw them in the trash can as you work in design? Once you do that and do it up front, it will make a big difference in the final product.
No, I mean, I think that can be used for like, I mean, most everything. I mean, it's kind of the same idea as like when you build a house, you don't just start building it. You like, you have an architect or you personally plan it out. You get your square footage plan, you figure it out. You figure out like what are my structure bases? How do I keep this afloat? And like you said, if you just start doing it, you realize real quickly like, oh, this didn't work. Now I'm gonna have to go back and redo all of this and
All this work,
restart. Yeah.
and it's a lot more expensive if you do it that way. So
Oh yes, no, I can very much imagine. And I mean, kind of like you said, like learning something, like going back and like loving to learn something is always helpful. But like I know that sometimes, like for me, like going through and explaining how you do something, sometimes I will then learn like through my own teaching, like, oh, I've never thought about it this way or anything like that. Was there any moment like that for you during like while you were writing this book?
Well, one of the very interesting things is that the process of normalization is something that's been around since the 60s. And most people go to what they call level three.
Mm.
They call it third normal form. And every database I've done, I've taken the third normal form. It's just standard. But there are additional forms beyond that, fourth and fifth. And they're very esoteric. They handle very unusual situations. But it was really interesting to research them, test them out, see if some of our databases fit into those forms. Even though their unusual occurrences can occur, it's a nice exercise to pick up and play with the additional forms that 99% of the time I would never need to deal with. But it was nice to learn about them and play with them a little bit on it.
Nice. And has there been anything that you've taken from this book into like your everyday work schedule?
Well, I did take some of the applications that, the databases I worked on and said, like, would these handle these additional forms? Is the way this
Mhm.
designed, could this error potentially occur? And came across one who would actually, again, it was a weird situation, but would have triggered an error had it not been implemented in the fourth form. So I did actually go ahead and implement the fourth form in that particular scenario just to prevent that error. It was only one database out of like 20 I looked at that actually would have tripped up on that because it was, again, it's an odd situation. But it's very useful to go in and say, hey, we find this and circumvent it from causing a problem down the road.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I think that's great. And then, I mean, to that, like, and while we're kind of talking about, like you're saying, like, I know we talked earlier about the fact that you've been involved in this topic for a while. Like, what was it that inspired you to write this book? Like in back in 2022 when you put it together, where did that spark come from?
I'm actually working on a third-party product which is basically checks out databases for database resiliency. Like, how good are your naming conventions? Do you have keys that are not properly built? And in doing that, I've been testing against a large number of production databases, and the sheer number of errors that the thing is reporting tells me like this knowledge has to get out there. And
Mhm.
it's one of those things I've known for a long time. I do in my daily practice, but I realize there's a lot of benefit from other people, particularly new people to database design, that could gain from this. It would be useful knowledge to them. The company I work for currently has a extremely strong set of C sharp programmers. They use C sharp. They're very very good at it, but their database skills aren't up to par with the C sharp, and they know it. They admit it. They basically we focus more on this side of it, and a lot of them have benefited from the book where they start thinking about database a little bit different. And then you end up seeing the bottom line results. We had one particular report that ran in 2.5 minutes. I kind of worked with them and said, let me spend some time showing you how to optimize this. And with a couple minor changes, that report now runs in 1 second and returns the identical information. Now, of course, they were a little like, you went from 2.5 minutes to 1 second. I said, well, that's why you design your databases properly in the first place. So it's a good education for people who are very solid programmers, but kind of weaker in the database side. This helps them kind of get up to speed and, as much as your technical C sharp, pick up the database knowledge as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's, and I mean, I will say this, I think that a lot of people definitely took, like, benefit in this book, like, in hint of it, I mean, one of the winners of our award series going out, so clearly some people found it very useful.
Good, good. That's good to know. So that's why I write these
Yeah.
books. So.
Yeah, and I mean, for anyone if anyone who has not gotten to read it yet and might be interested, what are, like, 3 key points that you think people would take away from this book?
Well, the biggest point I want people to realize is turn the computer off before you do this. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds foolish, but there's so much of a temptation to jump in and use the tool, and that costs you in the end, and it's not worth doing.
Mhm.
And probably the next thing is there's this process called normalization. You hear that buzzword, normalization. It sounds like a technical, difficult thing to do, but it's actually a lot of common sense. And if you follow the normalization process, it's going to click in your mind that, hey, this all makes sense. Yeah, I can see why I do that. Don't skip the steps. Don't think, oh, they're not important. They are very, very important. They, will prevent errors down the road. Unless you like getting phone calls at midnight saying, hey, something broke. Take the time to do it upright, and you'll regret that. You'll be able to sleep better at night. The other thing is use standards. There are a lot of database standards. For example, country codes are standardized. Everybody, there's a company, the ISO company has a list of what the country code should be. So, there are 2 or 3 digit codes. I have found a database where the country code was not using the standards. It basically generated a unique identifier for each country. So now if somebody comes along and says, Well, wait a minute. Well, why are you using these things instead? The standards are there to make life easier and to make it so other people can look at your database and understand it. So if you use a country code standard or a phone code standard, other people can pick it up and not have problems understanding it. So don't neglect the standards. Don't think, oh, I can do better than that. Those guys get paid a lot of money at ISO to come up with these standards. Pick the brain, take advantage of it. They're definitely going to help you from reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, like you're saying, like really, like we're like knowing what works and kind of taking off from there. I think there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot to be said about like when we started learning, like it's so easy to get into like the routine of like, oh, I think I can skip this, but there is something nice about having that standard that you're set to and like working through, and it'll kind of like you said, the goal of it is just make it easier for you each time that you're doing it.
Yeah, and you know, I don't have to want keep up my country list. Sometimes
Mhm.
countries change every 10 years, different borders, different time zones, things like those lines. And I don't want that on my plate. I have enough on my plate
Yeah.
to design the database. Let somebody else worry about that, and I'll just pick their brains and take advantage of it. So,
Hey, there you go. Well, also, like you mentioned, like kind of like taking like having resources and stuff that can really be helpful in this process. Are there any resources that you would recommend for anyone getting started, along with your ebook?
well, other than the ebook, yeah, there are others out there. The two I'd recommend is there's a website called SQL Server Central, and all things SQL Server live in this website. And they have what they call the Stairway series. And the Stairway series takes a particular topic and produces, and they do have a Stairway series called Stairway to Database Design. Very well written, and basically goes through a lot of the similar type of issues in the book where, these are the ways you do the process and these are the things you take care of. Highly recommend SQL Server Central, to anybody in the database realm. Not just for that, but they also have a lot of technical issues we can look at and say, hey, how do I do this? To give you an example, a lot of people write a holiday script. Well, these are the holidays, and every year they populate the table. I'm lazy, so I wrote one that basically you would pass it the year, and it would automatically generate the holiday list for you. And that is sitting in SQL Server Central. You can search for it and find it, and it basically prevents me from year to year having to figure out what the holidays are and plug them in the database. This is kind of stuff SQL Server does, and this has a great resource for it. The other is this company called Redgate. Redgate is a large provider of SQL Server tools, and there's a person by the name of Joe Selko, very well known in the SQL community, very well respected, very, very knowledgeable individual. He also has a series on Redgate called The Better Way to Build a Database. Again, recommended reading. Pretty much anything by Joe Selko is top list. I always like reading his work. He's very, very thorough. He gets into some topics that will you'll have to wrap your mind around a little bit. But these introductory ones that talk about how the database are worthwhile, after you're in a book, of course. So,
Nice. And then you mentioned, like I said, we've been talking a little bit about like other resources, but do you have any like blog pages or websites or anything that you would also like to share if anybody would like to hear a little bit more from you?
well, I have a website, joebooth-consulting.com. It's been up there for a long, long time and probably a little bit dated, but it does have, information on it. Some of the things I come across, some of the things I share. Everybody's welcome to go on there, take a look. And if you jump on, drop me a line, say hello, and introduce yourself.
Nice. And I mean, those are most of the questions that I had today, but also I want to reach out and I just want to ask, like, do you have any closing notes or anything else that you would like to add?
Well, one of my absolute favorite quotes is ready, fire, aim. And a
Mm.
lot of times people do that. They think, okay, I'm all ready. I'm going to do all the work, and then afterwards I'll do the design work. And that's always
Mhm.
wrong because you're going to miss.
Mhm.
Think of ready, aim, fire. Get my things ready, build it in paper, make it work, and then go ahead and do it. Um, Again, you may look at this and say, "Gosh, this is a lot of extra work. I know I could do this real quickly." But again, that means you're going to get those phone calls at midnight when, oh, so and so got married, and turns out we had their name in two different places. So this form finds it, and then the main name. Well, you could have solved that up front if you did normalization step one. So plan it out. Take the time to design. Yes, it seems like a little extra work up front, but after you do a couple, you find it very intuitive, very natural, and then you will not make these design decisions on the road or going to cause some what they call anomalies in your database that will cause people lose confidence in your system. And take the time, do the design, do up front, and I think it will you'll like the dividends it pays you in the end.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, like I know I brought it up before with the house, but like I think that that is one of the things that like it's like kind of like you'd think it's intuitive and it's like always that idea of like yeah planning, yeah, plan ahead, like that's helpful, but I feel like that is something we as humans almost have to be reminded of like more often than you would think. Like I know like
Well,
it's so it like especially in the world where stuff is so like pretty, I mean everything's pretty fast, and I think
yeah,
it's
it's
like it's
fast,
easy. Yeah.
and the tools are very, very helpful. And it's easy to jump in the tool and use the tool, but if you aren't ready to use the tool because you haven't done the upfront work, you're going to
Yeah.
mess it up. So
Yeah. No, I mean definitely, and I think that's just something that like it's good to remember. Like, yeah, it might be like a slower start, but that slower start will more likely cause for a faster process as a whole, or might like like I said,
fully.
you won't have to go back through. You have to like it's taken care of at the beginning because it was planned out ahead of time.
Yeah, and part of my job in one of the roles I do is we're like the fourth troubleshooting arm in the company. So if it reaches us, it's really got some bizarre situation that caused it because there's a lot of people above us before it reaches my desk. And a lot of these are related to just simple things that had the design been done initially properly, this would have never reached our desk. This would have been caught, fixed, and would not be an issue right now. And the company has a good reputation that when they realize that, they do go back and fix these things. But I prefer they don't occur. I'd like my ticket to be totally empty one day.
I can relate to that.
So
But nice.
okay,
Well, Joe, as I mentioned, I thank you so much for joining today. Like you answered all of my questions and then some, and I hope that you were able to, and I'm sure you were probably able to answer any questions for anyone who might be interested in the book.
sure, definitely. And go and reach out to my website, reach out to me at Syncfusion. I'll be very happy to help you out. And I enjoy working, and I'll have to put another book together for you guys soon. So
Excellent. And for everyone watching, I know we've already mentioned it, but Joe has written like Joe is the author and also the author of plenty of other Succinctly series books. So if you'd like to check him out, you can go on the Syncfusion website to our Succinctly page, which we will include in a link in this video's description, and check out everything that he has provided. But thank you all very much. And Joe, thank you again, and we look forward to future books with you.
yeah, thank you, Carter. Enjoyed our talk.
Excellent. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Have a wonderful day.